our soldiers. So when you ask me where it comes from, this was not some spontaneous 19, 20-year-old kid that lost his mind, that you know, went out of control for a second and slapped someone. This was policy. People sat down in offices, convenient, comfortable offices, and decided to kill people as revenge. And the next day, 15 people were reported dead that had no connection whatsoever to the attack on the IDF. So when we have to, and we exposed this. And then, you know, we weren't expecting something dramatic to change, because when people ask me, don't you think something should happen? Of course I think something should happen. But do you really think that the Israeli public or someone will be brave enough to say that the Minister of Defense has to be investigated? That the Chief of Staff has to be investigated? This is not a 19, 20-year-old or even a lieutenant that should be investigated. This is the system. This is the government. This is the policy. The story behind Breaking the Silence and what it's trying to do is that one day in March 2004, a young guy, a month before his discharge, woke up in the morning and found out that he can't look at himself in the mirror. That guy's name was Yehuda Shaul. He's the founder of Breaking the Silence. And he started to talk with his friends, with people that were his soldiers, his commanders, especially about Hebron. He served 14 months in Hebron in the second intifada. And that evolved into a exhibition of pictures taken by soldiers, not photographers, not journalists, just pictures that, you know, 18, 19-year-olds took for memories. And we took that out of photo albums, presented over 60 of them, with over 60 soldiers giving video testimonies about their Hebron service. And that evolved from there to what it is today, a much bigger group of soldiers that served all around the occupied territories as conscripts or as officers in the second intifada. And we've interviewed over 300, mostly discharged, some still in service, soldiers in the IDF. And the message, or what we're trying to do with all this, is when we were discharged, the first thing, the fundamental thing that we all felt was the amazing distance or gap of information between what is really going on in the occupied territories, what we're really doing over there, and what is known back home to our parents, to our neighbors, to our public figures and leaders, what is told by the press, what is told by the IDF. And we felt a moral obligation as much as a social obligation, as people who grew up in Israel, did their military service, who love their country and are very, very concerned about how we will look tomorrow, how we will raise our children tomorrow, because we don't want to see ourselves anywhere else. And out of that concern, we felt the moral obligation of bringing that information, the true stories of what we're doing in the occupied territories, to the public, and raising a true public debate on all platforms. Press, politicians, everywhere you can think of, about the real corruption, the moral corruption that is happening in the occupied territories, the price of sending more and more generations to be occupiers.
Breaking the Silence tried to fight a code of silence which has many aspects. First of all, and the most important one as we see it, is the personal one. When you stand in a post or in a checkpoint, and I commanded Kalandia checkpoint between Jerusalem and Ramallah, where almost 3,000 Palestinians cross every day, and your job, even if you don't want to do it, you stop people from living the life that they should have. You take their freedom to go to work, you take the freedom to go to university, and many times, even if you don't want to do it, you humiliate people, you make them stand in line for hours, and when you go back home after a month of doing it, you have a weekend break, you don't come home to your girlfriend or to your mother and say, hey, the day before yesterday, I saw somebody more or less your age, mommy, and I let her wait in the sun for 5 hours because I didn't have a permission to let her pass. I mean, that daily life of occupation, of controlling people, is the first aspect of the silence code. Breaking the silence is a personal process. It's something, first of all, it's not an easy thing to look at yourself in the mirror and see what you really have done, and the other side. It's a very good feeling to feel a hero, to talk about the fights, the times that you were fighting terrorists and that you saw them, but realizing the damage for the population, realize the hatred that you've created is a hard thing. And when we call people friends, when we have telephones from units in the army and we start calling to people, most of them say, we kind of agree with what you're doing, some agree more, some less, but leave me alone. I mean, I've served, I've done it, I've left the country for a year to forget about it, I'm back here, just let go. And so it's not that easy to get people to talk, even if they agree with the total idea. But we've, as Avichai said, we've interviewed over 300 soldiers, and you need to understand that's not a 1 hour interview, it's or TV interview. Someone tells you about 2 years or 3 years out of his life.
It's important to understand the two different aspects or two different types of testimonies that we've collected until now. In the first few months, most of the testimonies that we exposed were testimonies on the routine, daily brutality and individual or group corruption that happens, humiliation, abuse, theft, looting, things that for Israelis mostly, but I think for any person that wants to deny, can say rotten apples, extreme cases, people that broke the law, broke regulations, and should be convicted or prosecuted. And it sometimes doesn't even matter that you tell them, well, these are stories about units, about hundreds or thousands of soldiers. And that was something that we were exposing for a long time. And the last campaign that we did was a massive collection of testimonies on policies, procedures, orders, things that can't be very easily swept under the rug and called rotten apples, because they are the system. And the main issue that we were addressing in this campaign were the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement in Israel are classified. They, in this intifada, are not even written down, even though in past times the IDF used to issue or distribute pocketbooks with the rules of engagement in the occupied territories to every conscript and reservist. In this intifada, not only didn't they distribute this, it is all passed down orally. There is no document written down that is passed down to the officers in the field or the soldiers. And we have decided that, especially because the most dominant thing or dramatic thing that has happened in the second intifada is the casualties, is that people are being killed, and children, regular people, innocent people are being killed, and it has been much more violent on both sides, both on the Israeli side with the suicide bombers, and both on the Palestinian side with all the actions that are being done by the IDF. And we've exposed a massive collection of those. I think for me the one that sticks out the most is an officer from an elite unit telling us about his experiences in Rafah. And his testimony is very, very long, so I won't say it all, but he talks about two main issues. One is the demolition of houses, and he describes how in the briefing they were told that the procedure is you don't go into Rafah on foot, because it was right after the APCs blew up. If you remember, that was in the summer of 2004, and it was very hectic, and you couldn't walk by foot, so you come with APCs, tanks, and bulldozers, D9